It would seem as though every time these people do something, it is you and I, the American people, and pretty much all people around the world for that matter, that are always the casualties and not them. It's almost as if they are doing these things on purpose, intentionally, just so they can try and make us suffer even more. Oh yeah, that's right. They are. Ladies and gentlemen, we are officially in an oil war. And this is particularly important now, especially after the most recent CPI inflation report shows prices have been coming down over the last month when compared to the previous CPI report year over year. So good old President Joe Biden admitted right before the midterm election that he has no plans of doing any more drilling for oil in the United States. And this is a big freaking problem, people. Grandpa Joe said in an interview that there's no more drilling and he hasn't formed any new drilling. And so it seems that this is confirmation that Biden has lied to us yet again about trying to drill more oil here in the United States. So for example, back on June 22nd, Biden stated, "I know my Republican friends claim we're not producing enough oil and I'm limiting oil production. And quite frankly, that's nonsense." End quote. Well. It appears as though it isn't nonsense. And basically what he was saying is going forward, he's going to be actively blocking any opportunity to drill new oil as he tries to push forward his green energy agenda. We are doomed, folks. Man, November 5th, 2024 can't get here fast enough. Am I right? Surviving the pandemic is shaping up to be nothing in comparison to surviving this current administration's presidency and walking out of this fight with a shirt still on our backs. All right, so this is direct confirmation from the President of the United States' mouth that he and the White House will be blocking oil drilling in the United States. And he couldn't have picked a worse time either, because right now our world is being held hostage and one of our main bargaining chips is the very resource that he is allowed to dry up for the United States: oil. Reason being, oil powers our entire planet. And that power is run by a tiny handful of nations who have the power to control its global price as well as its supply, and thus the economy of black gold. So for nations that include Venezuela and the oil-rich kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, currently the OPEC oil cartel is creating a global oil crisis resembling a similar situation from the 1970s by effectively starting an economic war with the United States, which triggered the U.S. to take serious emergency actions that could have ripple effects on our everyday lives. And by everyday lives, I mean our wallets and our bank accounts, stretching paychecks to the max, burying families deeper into debt, maxing out credit card limits, and relying on pawn shops and possibly even payday loans just to get by and have enough spare pocket change to put $20 on pump 10. And this is only the beginning, folks, and why everyone should be preparing for this all to get a whole lot worse. So I'm sure that we're all aware that gas prices have gone up quite a bit, quite a lot in the last year. And there is actually some good news when you think about it. Well, sort of. So it appears that it's going to continue rising. And so in just a short period of time, we're going to look back on today's prices and realize just how good we had it. Kind of. Okay, not really. It is actually really bad news, but I prefer to try and find some way to cheer myself up during these tough economic times. So to understand exactly why prices are going up and up and up, we must first discuss U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserves, or otherwise known as the SPR. The SPR is made up of several massive reserves of oil stored in huge underground salt caverns in 4 locations on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Total capacity? Well, I think they said about 700 million barrels of oil can be stored in these petroleum reserves. The SPR was originally designed as the country's emergency store of oil that we could use in times of great need, like if a war were to break out, or if we needed to make up for a serious oil deficit in order to keep the nation running. The SPR has only existed for about 50 years, and the reason it was created in the first place was almost an exact mirror as to what is happening in our world today. In the 1970s, the world experienced a severe oil crisis, a crisis that was created by OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, after war broke out in the Middle East. Now, during this, the Yom Kippur War, that provoked OPEC to unleash their wrath on opponents by punishing any nations that supported Israel in the conflict, which included the great old US of A. Well, due to OPEC controlling most of the world's oil at that time, the shortage created incredible global demand, causing oil prices to almost triple overnight. And this made the US realize just how reliant it was on foreign oil. And so, in 1977, the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve was born. So this stockpile of emergency oil for the United States, the SPR, is extremely important and an important part of what I want to tell you guys today. And we're going to get back to that in just a moment. But for now, I want to focus on OPEC, because it seems like it's returning to its old tricks, because it has just declared that it's going to restrict the world's oil supply. And the consequences of this decision are going to be felt by many, especially you and I, and all of us watching here in America, each and every time we go to fill up and put gas in our cars and trucks. Oh, and if you're saying to yourself right now, well, Kevin, I drive an EV. I drive a Tesla or a Rivian or a Porsche Taycan. This doesn't affect me. Well, my misguided and blindly naive friend, oh, but it does. Oh, but it does. It's okay. You are only repeating the lies and rhetoric that the mainstream liberal media bias is feeding you on a daily basis to align with their agenda and manipulate and distort the American's mind. But it's okay. You're here amongst friends who want to set your mind free and wake you up from this crumbling simulation, unplug you from the system and introduce you to the real world. And you don't even have to swallow that little red pill for it to happen. Nope. Just subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. All right, now where was I? Oh, so OPEC is restricting its oil supply by 2 million barrels per day. And this amounts to a little over 2% of what our planet uses on a daily basis. So in reality, this doesn't sound like much. However, it will likely have a significant effect on global oil prices. You see, OPEC's reason for doing this is simple. They say it's going to stabilize prices. And so if we translate that into layman's terms, basically, in other words, it's going to bring costs back up after the recent slump. A move that will put billions more in profits in the oil cartel's pockets. Now, here's the thing. A few years ago, OPEC raising its prices wouldn't have really had much of an effect on the United States, or possibly any for that matter. However, this is a much different story with the way that things stand today. And here's why. The United States is the world's single biggest producer of oil, but collectively, OPEC is much bigger overall, which means that OPEC has incredible power to manipulate oil prices. And the U.S. knew this after it was made abundantly clear after the crisis in the 1970s, which is why for decades the United States has been doing all it can to become self-reliant in terms of its oil needs. So back in 2018, while Donald Trump was in office, the United States became a net exporter of oil for the first time in decades. And by some reports, the first time this has happened in over 75 years. So basically, the United States as a country was producing more oil than we needed, meaning we had succeeded in our oil independence journey and didn't need to rely on the outside world. Most importantly, OPEC for oil. However, this is not the case today. All right, so the reasons for the deficit are complicated, but primarily are the result of climate action taken by the current President Joe Biden's government. And what it simply breaks down to is this. The reality is the U.S. currently uses more oil than it produces. Point blank. Plain and simple, end of story. And these uses include exporting our oil supply and, most importantly, our reserves to other countries. So right now, the U.S. is creating somewhere around 15 million barrels of oil every day. But we are also using more than 19 million barrels per day. So quick math will tell us that this creates a daily deficit of nearly 5 million barrels per day, which means that now the U.S. can't function without getting oil from abroad, thus leaving us vulnerable and at the mercy to heavy manipulation by OPEC and their pricing manipulation tactics. So in other words, OPEC literally has the United States bent over a barrel when it comes to oil. And that means as a result, you and I are getting screwed over every single day, every single week, and potentially seeing this lasting for the foreseeable future without some strong major reform and opposition to what and whom are currently destroying Americans financially and ruining family household balance sheets all across the board. Thanks, Joe. So even though OPEC is making this happen, if you want to know who is really pulling the strings behind this curtain, then we must turn to the elephant in the room. And that is, in fact, Saudi Arabia. From the start, since it was founded in 1960, OPEC's actions were a direct result of Saudi Arabia, which has been the de facto leader of OPEC all along. The nation is an absolute monarchy in its rulers, the House of Swords, and are some of the richest people on earth. And the family rules the kingdom with an iron fist. No mercy. So just like China, the Saudi government heavily monitors internet usage, mostly so that it can censor its people and maintain political and religious power. But I bet the Saudis would find it a little more difficult to monitor the internet if citizens were to hide their online usage. And personally, my favorite way of staying hidden online is through the use of Surfshark VPN. Now, I'm a really strong believer in online privacy, which is why I take using a VPN so seriously. And with Surfshark, I can hide my browsing data with a single click, and they keep my online data private with the most secure levels of encryption. Using a VPN like Surfshark also allows me to choose from more than 5,600 different servers around the world to get around any geo-targeted content blocks. And unlike other VPNs, Surfshark doesn't slow down my surfing either. I find it to be very helpful and a useful tool for so many reasons, and security being my main concern. Do you guys use VPNs? Comment down below and let me know. But either way, all right, so I did say that I'd talk more about the SPR again. So here it is. And so since it was created, oil has been removed from the SPR only 3 times. Once in 1980, again in 1991, and lastly in 2011. These were all during times of crisis. For example, during the first Gulf War, and again after Hurricane Katrina hit. So let me correct myself, actually. Make that 4 times that oil has been removed from the SPR, because now currently oil has been once again flowing out of the SPR for almost a year over the last about 11 months since Joe Biden has signed off on a significant removal of oil from the SPR and has just announced his administration will be taking another 15 million barrels out. But this time, the reason isn't because of a major crisis. It's simply to keep gas prices low for the American people. And if you think today's gas prices are low, geez. Talk about putting lipstick on a pig. Okay, so far, 26 of the U.S. emergency oil reserves have been depleted, taking them down to their lowest levels since the 1980s. And in a move that Forbes has called dangerous because of the precarious position it puts the United States in, and because of how it gives OPEC even more power to manipulate the market. And so this is all because OPEC wants the U.S. to become its biggest customer. And the United States consumes more oil than any other country on earth, while also giving it away to other countries like the UK and Haiti. So the bigger its oil deficit becomes, the more oil it will have to buy from OPEC, putting billions of dollars into pockets of the world's major oil cartels in the process. So not only does this country not know how to manage money, they don't know how to manage oil either. And their practices that they employ to help with the situations are literally fatal blows with no conceivable solution that is even remotely possible of being executed in any of these leaders' lifetimes to see it through. So remember, OPEC has a vested interest in making sure the U.S. uses as much of its emergency reserves as possible. But OPEC's actions won't just affect you and I here in the United States. Nah, its restrictions of oil will drive up fuel prices for the entire world. And I hate to say it, but as of right now, sadly, we, the United States of America, don't have any real power in order to fight back against OPEC's manipulation. Now, granted, Biden's government is possibly planning to make old threats towards OPEC a reality, and to do so to fight against OPEC, the U.S. is proposing the use of NOPEC, the No Oil Production and Exporting Cartels Act. Man, I tell you what. If these jokers are good at something, it's making up silly acronyms. Now, NOPEC is a set of laws first introduced in 2007 that would mean that the U.S. could punish OPEC for manipulating the oil market. NOPEC laws didn't end up being enacted back in 2007. Instead, the U.S. government has now moved to implement them today. A few years ago, the legislation officially moved to the Senate and is due to be voted on very soon. And unlike the gold standard bill, a bill designed to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold and for other purposes, which would require the Federal Reserve note to be designated in terms of gold, and a disclosure of gold holdings or transactions for which, if passed, the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury would be required to comply within 30 months of the enactment, which has really a snowball's chance in hell of being ratified. But the NOPEC laws have a good chance of being passed, as they have support from across the aisle from both Republicans and Democrats. And if passed, these laws would have real power, making capping the production of oil or fixing oil prices completely legal, which could possibly result in heavy sanctions against OPEC nations. And considering controlling oil prices like this is the main reason OPEC was created in the first place, it could make the organization useless, hypothetically. It could also mean that Saudi Aramco, the biggest oil producer in the world, might be broken up, something that would seriously damage the power of Saudi Arabia, which is the nation that profits the most from Aramco. So long story short, what's happening right now is effectively a war over oil that is being fought with economics and laws instead of weapons so far. Because let's be honest, we all know how well sanctions work. We all know how nicely cartels play by the rules too. And we must always remember the simple fact that just like every single other war out there, there are always casualties. And in this case, it is basically every normal person on the planet, like it or not. The old buried dinosaur juice beneath the Earth's surface is intertwined with our economy in every single possible way. And yes, I am talking to you too, Tesla and EV owners. It's essential for you to get to work or to ship your products to customers. Without it, food would quickly disappear from supermarket shelves. Food shortages and food insecurities would be overwhelming. International travel would come to a screeching halt, and every product in society that contains plastic would be no more. Because of this, the OPEC oil war won't just increase its profits, it will drive up the cost of literally everything in society, goods and services. This resulting in the US and American citizens effectively all becoming pawns in a massive global game where the winners are only the most powerful entities on the planet. And at a time when most of us are already experiencing record high inflation, this is news that almost nobody wants to hear. But this is the reality, and we should all be taking the steps to prepare for it. So just to recap, OPEC restrictions are going to mean that we should all be prepared for an oil price hike, or in simple terms, an everything price hike. So despite inflation and CPI reports showing a slight decline, I'm expecting and anticipating for prices to continue to keep climbing up. So if you're already feeling the pinch from inflation and you don't yet have a budget, now might be the time to do so. And the only people that will be excited about this price hike will be anyone that owns shares in an oil company or other closely related and profitable industry that will likely see a rise in stock performance that will be distributed amongst the stock market shareholders. And this is exactly why I continue to invest through automatic buys and dollar cost averaging in the companies that I find to be most valuable, and have continued to maintain a consistently profitable track record over the long haul. And investing through my Robinhood brokerage app just makes it that much easier, which is why I have included a link in the description for anyone out there who wants to go ahead and get started and get ahead of this curve, and begin by joining Robinhood now and opening an investment brokerage account. And the coolest part about it all is that when you sign up, connect a bank account, and get approved, you automatically get a free stock. That's free money, folks. And I like the sound of that. Robinhood is giving out free stocks, and you can earn up to $1,500 in free stocks each calendar year. So this is an amazing opportunity to start building wealth and start putting the economy to work for you instead of the other way around. Click the link in the description to get started. All right, you guys all take care, be blessed, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.